I love you. Couch potatoes, lovely couch potatoes. I, the editing green traveler of the future, would like to apologize for the performing green traveler of the past. You see, he forgot to make sure his microphone was working, and therefore recorded entirely using his laptop's microphone, and its quality is pretty shite. So I apologize. We do not have the advanced technological capabilities of Mr. Peter Jackson to beautify my audio as he did the Beatles audio. But I hope you can still enjoy. I hope it's not too detrimental. So I apologize, and we'll try to make sure this does not happen again.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Gentlefolk, ladies and men, we're glad to have you here again. So please, won't you come on in and sit with us here on the couch? I am the Green Traveler from Gorsh. I was going to try to do a British accent, but I can't, so...
Yeah. I was knocking stuff around on my desk like a cat, but then I remembered that we're not doing Aristocats. Well, this is I'm the Faceless Leon, everybody. Welcome to the couch, Couch Potatoes. This is Green and Faceless on the Couch, podcast about movies and TV. Today it might be about TV. We're saying it's about TV.
It's technically a TV talks. I am I think it's easily argued that this is not a show. This is just a very long ass movie.
It's a documentary in 3 parts. A really
exactly.
long one.
And we're talking the Beatles, Get Back.
Get Back.
It's just a goddamn beautiful thing of art, honestly, let's be honest. So before we get into it though, did you have a faceless pitch? Did I have It's fine if you don't, because we got a lot to talk about.
I think we got a lot to talk about. I think I'm gonna let it slide because I think it would take me too long to think of something.
Alrighty. We'll go ahead and just go into it. This is a unique TV talks that need no faceless pitch.
No, it don't. Because we just watched almost 6 hours.
I think it's 10 hours. It's close to.
Oh, that's right. 10. Right. Yeah. Well, the first one's 3 something.
I think the first one's 2 hours and 40. The next one was 2 hours and 50, and then the last one's just 2 hours and 30, something like that. Yeah,
the last one's not as long.
No, and I thank the Lord for that. Yeah, but when I think back on it, I say thank the Lord that the last one that wasn't that long, but I literally could have watched 10 more hours of this.
I mean, Peter Jackson watched near 60 more hours of it.
Yeah, so here's the backup of it. First the personal backup. The Beatles, I've loved them forever. They were probably the first band that I attached myself to as a kid. My parents, they listened to a lot of stuff. Obviously, I listen to what my parents listen to. That's kind of just how you, discover stuff or start discovering what you like in regards to music. And I knew I didn't like country music too much. There's some country I can deal with, but not a lot.
Yeah, sorry, everyone I grew up with.
Right, but I was definitely though into rock and the pop. Those were my genres, and I also liked rap, but that came along much later. My parents didn't listen to rap.
I like everything. Honestly, there's occasionally a country song that I'm like, yeah, that slaps.
Ooh, I don't remember what I was saying though right before.
I don't either. So let's just jump back in right here. There was weird technical hiccup.
Anyways, but I've loved. That's it. We were talking about what music we liked, and and Beatles are one of the first bands that I really ever fell in love with, and I didn't really love much of their earlier era. Honestly, I didn't like their love songs are fine.
The old rockers,
those first few albums.
Yeah,
they're good. They have some really good moments, but for the most part, I'm just I like the stuff that they wrote, that they experimented on.
Yeah,
the boundaries that they pushed.
They're a great studio band.
Yeah, I can't remember which album came first, if it was Rubber Soul or Revolver, but one of those albums, once they basically stopped touring and just went to the studio.
Yeah.
Holy fucking shit, did they blow up for me? they blew up for the world, but like
right.
listening to them as a kid, that was when I fell in love. Was when I was like, holy crap, these guys just changed my freaking way I looked at music, even as a kid.
Right. That's Floyd for me. I'm more into Floyd.
I'm sure that there is a decisive ranking for me of bands, but I only know the top 3 really well off the top of my mind, and it is Rush, the Beatles, Pink Floyd. Those are my top 3. And I just love Rush. Rush, they didn't fight. I'm sure they had little nitpicks and arguments, but there was no, they were in it for the music, for the friendship. They were solid. Now, Beatles, a lot of tension going on here.
Right.
And before this documentary, my thought was that the Let It Be album was when they broke up. That was the end all. They fought too much. George left the band. He came back so they could finish the album. They cut it. Clean wrap. We're done. History. That's just how I've always viewed this album. And I would listen to it and be like, oh, such a good album. But at the same time, like, I could hear them going their separate ways. And this whole documentary changed my fucking mind on it. Like, it literally flipped everything I thought about this album.
Yeah, it's totally different than that. There's a lot less aggression involved than I thought that there would be. I mean, there's a lot of hours that we're still not seeing here. So what they were filming for was that they were going to make a TV show out of it. But it turned into a documentary. And that documentary exists. I don't remember what the documentary is called.
Let It Be.
Let It Be, just the same as the album. And it is of them, making the album. And so they catch... It is dramatic. We're not going to say it's not dramatic, because it is.
Yeah.
But
there's some tense moments.
Very tense moments. But there's still a lot of love between them. And it was really nice to see, like, their actual side of it. Now, and what I was saying behind that, because there's 60 plus hours, we still don't see everything that happened. But I do feel like Peter Jackson, he wouldn't have given us nearly 9 hours if he didn't think this was the most valuable stuff.
Right.
We know that he can go on.
Yeah, and he chose a lot of tense moments that it's just like, there's no way that he cut out the more aggressive, terrible stuff.
Right.
He put in a lot of the bad alongside all of the good. And like, as you said, there's 60 plus hours of video footage, and then there's 200 plus hours or something like that of audio footage.
Yeah.
Like him and like, I don't know how many people sorted through this, but his editor was, I might say it wrong, but it's, and I'm sorry if I do, Jabez Olson. And like, together, him and Peter Jackson and Jabez Olson, like, amazing fucking job. There are some editing decisions that just killed me, and one in particular, because there's just so many small moments to choose from to talk about this movie. But one in particular is when John left the band, not long after George did, halfway through their recording session. There's just a moment where it's just Paul and Ringo left, and Paul is talking to Ringo and to all the people who are sitting with them, and Paul's explaining where he's at with what's going on.
Right.
And he's like, listen, we spent 10 years, me and John being best friends, writing everything together. Like, we were a creative couple. Like, there's no other way to look at it. We were like a relationship. And now he wants to create only with Yoko. And he's like, that's fine. Let the young lovers have their love. But it's just like, for him, it's like he's going through a breakup. Like, it's very upsetting to him. And he's trying to make light of it. He's making jokes a bit. And then the camera just holds on him. And it holds on him for like 45 seconds. Like, they didn't cut that shot. And it just held. And by the end, his eyes are like wet, like he's about to cry. He's looking really sad. And like, you know that if anybody says anything, he might spill. But then somebody comes up and is like, hey, John's on the phone. Can you go talk to him? And he's like, yep, I'm out. And he just like, gets up and walks out.
Yeah.
Beautiful fucking.
Which I imagine that was maybe like 45 minutes later, because there was a cut there.
There was a cut from the one shot of him to like the wide shot of somebody approaching. But I honestly don't think it was like 45 minutes later, because John didn't show up that day.
think the people around him might have been having the same conversation. It might have been.
Yeah, well, everybody was
just a different.
Everybody was talking,
because there were several camera angles too.
And that's the other thing too is the whole documentary opens up with a placard that says we don't have all of the right visual shots, but we put in what was most appropriate for the audio that was being presented. So there are times where you'll have a shot where people had walked off before, but now they're back in the shot, and it's just like they weren't actually there for the audio. They had walked away, but Peter didn't have a better shot for that moment.
Right.
So like they had to take some visual liberties because a lot of the footage is just it's old. It's it's not the greatest anymore. They use a lot of restorative techniques, which is amazing.
It's beautiful. I mean, it oh man, I got a fairly large screen. Everybody about does nowadays. Mine's not humongous by any means, but it really looked like it belonged on that. And sometimes when you blow up that film, they even talk about it in the movie. When you blow up film, it doesn't look good.
Yeah, that's why all that enhanced bullshit that you see in sci-fi really irritates people.
Yeah.
Because when it's like enhance that, enhance. No, that's not how it works. Like, we probably have technology that's getting better. I don't know, honestly.
There might be some like filter tools.
But it's like, it's not as good as you see it in the movies. Like, it's ridiculous. But one of the things that I know they enhanced, and I thought this was hilarious because I learned about this after the fact, even though the Beatles were paying these guys to document everything, to be documentarians and like to capture these moments, it started to irritate them after a while where it's just like, we're trying to have a conversation, you guys are trying to film this, like please turn the camera off. And one thing in particular, when they're playing solos and George and John were trying to have a conversation, but they realized that the audio guys were trying to listen in on their conversation because there was hidden mics everywhere throughout the set.
Right.
That was the only way they could make sure that they can catch these random moments of like private conversation. And so John and George would start playing louder on their guitars to cover up their conversation. And I think it's so fucking hilarious. And like that was lost to the Let It Be movie. The Let It Be movie couldn't use any of that footage because they couldn't hear any of it. But thanks to technology today, Peter Jackson was able to quiet the guitars and catch that conversation again. Just fucking amazing. Like so many good technological moments used on this documentary that give us, conversations that are lost to time. No longer. It's amazing.
Yep. It is pretty awesome. And I do like that. So, it kind of feels like a little bit like you're being a voyeur. And at first that kind of weirded me out, but I watched the credits pretty closely. Paul, Ringo, and Yoko were all producers.
I think George Harrison's ex was also one of the producers.
Yes, Peggy. Yes. I thought you were saying George Harrison was, and I'm like, what, his ghost?
Way back in 2001, they froze him.
Woke him up just for this. Yes. If you don't know the Beatles, both John Lennon and George Harrison, the other two, died after they were both murdered, right?
No, John was murdered. And George died of cancer. There was an assassination on him. Yeah, but I think he survived that. I do think he was stabbed. I can't remember honestly.
Oh, okay.
Somebody broke into his house.
Right. I couldn't remember if it was from complications from that or if he survived, because I do know that he made it to the hospital.
Complete aside from his murder, but like George Harrison's like solo, like after the Beatles.
Yeah.
Like I like John Lennon's work with Yoko Ono. There's Imagine, that's a fucking amazing song.
Yes.
What's the wheels go round and round? I don't know if that's the proper title, but like he's got a lot of beautiful solo career songs. And of course, Paul McCartney's got the Wings and whatever band he was with after the Wings. I think they broke up, right? But I don't remember. But like George had the career after the Beatles that I loved the most, which might be very
I would say musically, he and Paul were very successful.
Definitely. I mean, Ringo's had a decent solo career, but I mean...
He branched off into other things, though.
Yeah. And I know there's a lot of people who love Ringo. He was the underdog, and people are just like, he's my Beatle because he was the other one. He was literally just there for the weed and for the women, let's be honest. Like,
I love him in the documentary. Okay, I fucking love him. He is such a great. He doesn't put much input into the band.
No, he has like a blank 10,000 yard stare throughout most of it.
Yes, but he is so goofy in the background. He's like a silent clown, and I love him for it.
Right.
I just honestly fell in love with all of them. Really, I really did. I could see us being friends with these people because you get this is the only way to really capture somebody's personality, and they still know that the cameras are there most of the times, so they're probably not completely, because as soon as there's a lens, a possibility that somebody is watching you, you change.
But that's the thing is, they actually didn't know when the cameras were running. Yeah, the cameraman fucked with them because they covered up all the lights on the cameras. So it was just cameras set up around the set nonstop, and the cameraman would walk away. They would hit record, walk away, and then the Beatles would sit there play, and they would look and be like, yeah, there's nobody at that camera. They're not filming us. We're good to talk. And then they would just sit there and talk and jam out, not knowing that they were being recorded. The light was just being taped over.
And that's why I wanted to stress earlier that Paul, Ringo, and Yoko have greenlit the use of this stuff. So I mean Paul even said once he saw Peter Jackson's like finished product, Paul was just like, it changed my perspective on how we ended. Wow.
Because he had, because of how the media focused on it, and because of like his, he has also a closer perspective on it too.
Right.
But the media made it a huge thing. And everybody was like wondering, like, is it Yoko's fault? Was Paul too demanding? Was John too much on heroin or like other drugs? Like, what was the issue? They just blew up and made it such huge controversy that when you watch it and you realize they were just friends, they were just all strained at the level of skill they were able to put forth in such a group, that it just kind of busted, just broke them apart because they just, George couldn't perform the way he wanted to perform. He had to perform the way Paul wanted him to perform.
Right.
And, Paul and John were just constantly putting out music, and George couldn't get any of his music in there.
Right.
And, and then, even George, John on the other hand, too, John was criticizing George's music,
He wanted it to be more rock and roll. And George definitely has a folky feel, and I love it.
Yeah, he also has a little waltzy mixed in with his folk, and that was the one thing that I learned about through this documentary that I don't know why I never knew this, but Let It Be wasn't actually the last album they recorded. They recorded Abbey Road after
shit.
Let It Be, but they published Abbey Road before Let It Be. So Let It Be was just like the last one they published. Like it took them a year longer to publish this album after they performed on the rooftop. And in that year, they published and produced and published Abbey Road. And that's why I was confused, because one of the moments in the documentary is George is writing something. Maybe it's Somewhere. It's Something in the Way She Moves. You know that song?
Something in the way she moves. Yeah, I totally sang it wrong, so cut that.
It's so funny, like I'm not gonna, I want to sing it, but like I don't want to be recorded singing it. It's gonna be so bad. But like it's so funny because he couldn't figure out the lyric. He's like, attracts me like a what? And he's asking Paul and John. He's just like, Paul, what does it attract me like? It's like something in the way she moves me attracts me like what? A pomegranate? Like, and he can't figure it out. It's so funny. But like when they're doing that song, I was like, that's not on this album. That's on Abbey Road. I was like, why are they still working on that? And then I looked into it and I was like, they haven't even published Abbey Road yet while this is happening? So it really did just change my whole opinion on this album, because I'm not a Beatles historian. I don't know everything about them.
I don't know jack shit about them until I watched this. And then I noticed, and it's like one of those things like, oh, I didn't know how much I didn't know. There's a lot.
It's amazing. And it's just like, and that's the other thing is like, again, I do love Ringo. I'm not going to say I don't love Ringo. He is a beautiful person. But when you watch it, you do realize that the creative limitations, the stress that's happening, it's all among George, John, and Paul.
Yeah.
Like Ringo's just sitting there. He's trying to be the glue. He's trying to just laugh and have a good time. But he doesn't have his own music like to push into these albums.
Yeah, he gets a one in every once in a while.
I think he wrote 2 out of all 13 of their albums. I think Ringo Starr was credited with 2. And I only know one of them, and that is Octopus's Garden.
Mm-hmm. and he gets to play it.
I mean, it is a good song. I do enjoy it.
So okay, I will say a couple things about this show that are both cons and pros. One con is obviously the length, but you can pause it whenever you want and pick it right back up. It's very much a conversational thing. It's watching people work. There's not really any there's no narration. There's some subtitles. There is a narrative, yes. There's definitely a place that there's goals that they set forth, and there is conflict, and there is a shift in their goals.
and there's development of character. Like, it's amazing how Peter Jackson actually did pull a great story out of it.
He sure did.
Yeah.
But you got to watch the whole thing to get that. And I do think it's very compelling, but it is a commitment. That is all I wanted to say in a con for this, because I thought it was very enjoyable.
And if I can bounce off that, for me, it's not a con, because I am again, I'm not a Beatles historian, but I am a Beatles lover. Mm-hmm. Like, I love their music. And so it was addictive for me that I had 8 hours to watch of this, or 8+ hours, or whatever it is. Because it was like, I would watch like 2 hours and I'd be like, all right, I should probably pause this. And I would hit pause and I would like try to do something else. I would go for walking and it would just be nagging at me. It's like, oh man, I wish I could watch more of that. And I would sit back down and be like, all right, I'm watching more of this. Like, I literally was woken up at 3 a.m. by my dog and I couldn't get back to sleep. And I was like, well, I do have 3 hours left of the Beatles thing. And I got like 4 hours before work. So then I just watched the rest of it at 3 a.m. because I could. Like, it was addictive to me. Like, the length was not a problem. As I said at the beginning, I could have watched 10 more hours of this. It was so fun just to watch these 4 just sit and create.
Right.
I don't know why it was so fun, but it was.
Well, I will say that Peter Jackson did a very good job especially in between the first and second episode, making you being like, oh shit, I do want to watch more of this. Especially at the end of that first one. I don't want to spoil like where it ends at. Like, I feel like
that's fair.
I feel like we can talk about things that happen in it because it's historical and people know this story. A lot of the people know this story. Anyway, I was not as familiar on it because I was not as big of a Beatles fan. This, I think, really made me a lot more interested in their music. There's obviously songs that I love. I really dig Norwegian Wood. I don't know.
Oh, it's such a good one. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Rubber Soul album.
Yeah, I think that's a good album. I know a couple of songs off that one pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, from like their 6th or 7th album on, I can't remember what. Again, it's either Rubber Soul or Revolver. I don't know their albums chronologically like I do Rush's. Like, I can list all the Rush albums in order right here and now, but the Beatles ones I don't know in order. I just know that there is a turning point. It's either Revolver or Rubber Soul, where it's just like that's the moment where it's fucking phenomenal from there on.
Yeah.
And I think it's honestly Revolver, but Rubber Soul is like one of my favorite albums they put out, and that's the one that has Norwegian Wood. It's like, damn good album.
I would say that the ones I listen to the most are from Rubber Soul and Revolver. And
I mean, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. That's also
I do enjoy that album.
Yeah, that is the one that just becomes sound after a while.
But see, it is, I think, the most akin to what Floyd did, and I think that's why I know I like that album. I've listened to that all the way.
Right. Yeah. See, I feel like with Floyd, I've become more of a fan. I still love their Syd Barrett years, but like once Roger Waters becomes the main songwriter for them, that's when they became my
sure.
That's when I love
that shit's
Floyd.
good.
but I feel like I feel like their Sid Barrett days were more closer to the Sgt. Pepper's.
Yeah, they were, but
what's the one album? Adam Hart Mother from Pink Floyd. Is that the one with the cow on the front?
Yeah, but is that Sid Barrett? I don't know what time Roger Waters comes onto the.
Yeah, that might honestly be Roger Waters. I think I know that the Uma Guma one is Sid Barrett, right?
I thought that was after Roger Waters came on too. I thought it was rather early on, but I could totally be wrong, dude. I love music. I listen to music every single day, but
yeah,
I honestly I don't know what is in my brain, but I don't really care about the particular artist unless it's something that I'm really fully involved in.
That's
like,
fair.
It's just I just know that I like this music, and that's all I needed from them. They gave it to me. Thank you.
I think for me, it comes from like that writing perspective, where it's like when I'm writing, it's kind of how I am in the moment, and so when I hear music, I'm just like I'm so interested in what the artist was like, what the artist poured into that song, that I want to know more about the artist.
A little bit more interested, but my relationship with music is I cannot focus on the task that I'm trying to do unless there is sound. So
yeah, that's totally fair. Yeah, I'm like when I listen to music, I will typically either be multitasking, but there are so many times where will put on music and just sit there and soak in it. Like there's some albums that I just need to just listen to it. You know, I can't do anything if I'm not just listening to it. Like Clockwork Angels from Rush. That's one that it's just like if that's playing, I'm not doing anything else. I'm listening to that album. And then the again with Pink Floyd, like the reason I love Rush more is because Pink Floyd and the Beatles, they fought a lot. Not together, but like the inner bands fought a lot. Like Roger Waters is a tough act to work with. I've heard.
I could believe it. He did spit on people, I think. Yeah.
And then the Beatles, like you watch this documentary and you see that they all have their own issues that are hard to work with. But like Ringo's like he's there, he's not really paying attention. Like Paul's constantly telling him, "Hey, you're playing this riff wrong. I don't want you to play it that way.
Yeah.
I want you to like you're doing ba-da-pa-choo, and I need you to do ba-da-pa-ting." You know, he's like you gotta, and like Paul is his problem is that he's very controlling.
Yes.
Part of the backstory is Brian Epstein, their manager, passed away like a year or so before the Let It Be album, and he was what kept them working. You know, he was like, you guys can be you can be creative, you can have fun, you can enjoy your drugs and everything and have like all this good life, but you got to be making sure you're doing this stuff. And he kept them on point. And when he died, they didn't have, like, Paul even says it. He's like, I've become the father figure, and I don't want to be the father figure.
Right.
You know, he's like, he's trying to control them. He's trying to be, like, he really is like a Mozart, like, composer kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if Mozart's a good comparison for a composer. But
well,
like, he has so much control that he wants to enforce over everything.
If you believe the legend, Mozart just sat and just wrote it out without any mistakes or anything. And this show clearly shows their process. And that's honestly my favorite part about it, is these tunes that you're super familiar with because our culture is just soaked in it. And we do thank you, UK, for all the music. that is man, I do listen to a lot of British artists.
Songs.
Yeah.
Right, I do too. And that was my favorite part too, because there's so many moments where, like, specific, like, right off the top of my head, when George is writing that something in the way she moves, and he can't figure out, you know, he's like, attracts me like a pomegranate. He's like, that's not good. Like, I can't figure out what fits there. And I'm sitting there screaming, like, no other lover, you dumbass. Like, it's like no other lover.
You dumbass.
Come on, you know this. It's in your head. And like, even the I think it's the Two of Us song with Paul and John.
I love that song. I can't recall
so
that I had heard it before this, though. which I don't know how I could have escaped from that because it's too good. Like, it had to have been on the radio.
I have no idea when the first time I heard it was, but it was definitely going in with the knowledge that, you know, before I'd seen this documentary, obviously, that the band had broken up during this album.
Yeah.
You know, listening to that song, that it really does seem like a breakup romance song between John and Paul, and it's so sad.
It is.
There's a moment though in that when they're playing that Two of Us song, when Paul even says to John, he's like, it's like a romance song between us. He's just like, it's like we're talking about us. And John just like laughs, and then I was just like, oh, it really is. And I'm just like crying.
Yeah. It does have anonymous tone, and it has another level to it because George is in the background there, just looking at them like it is. You guys think it's just about the two of you, and yeah, and you could see that running in his head while he's strumming the guitar. The way that Paul wants. Exactly,
because I think that might have been the album or the song that they're playing.
It was, and it's all through that through the documentary that you see him in the background listening to this, and you can almost feel like it's like, oh man, I didn't actually know who left first. So for me, it wasn't necessarily a surprise because what Peter Jackson cut out of this. You can see it. You can see it running in George's mind throughout the whole thing until he's just, it very politely, well, I think I'm going to leave the band now. That's exactly.
And then somebody's like, who are we going to replace you with? He's like, well, get Eric Clapton, I guess. It's just like, holy shit.
He means it. He's done.
Yeah, he's like, I'm out. I'm done. And it's very sad, but then at the same time, like, it did give me new light on that song though, because when he does come back and they move studios and they're doing it at I can't remember what the name of the studio. It's Apple Studios, maybe.
Yeah, Apple Studio, I think. Whatever.
Yeah, and when they get to that studio, that new one, it became a much livelier and beautiful experience. Because when they were the first studio they're at, it was like for a TV show that they had rented. It was huge. It had terrible acoustics. It was a very dark, like black curtain room.
Right.
Like it, very ominous feeling. And then they get into this lively, like lime green colored white studio. Like it's beautiful. And that's when their whole mood shifts, and that's when they're just writing and they're just having fun. They still have a few spats every now and then, but there's a moment where they play Two of Us, and John and Paul are just like singing it through their teeth.
Yeah, that was so funny.
It's so good. They're just having a fun time, and they're like, how can we play this song differently? Like, we're tired of playing this. Let's to rush going nowhere. Oh, together.
And you know, like, oh, like so they're all so goofy, but goddamn, John is the goofiest. I never would have guessed.
He was fucking stoned.
I honestly, I don't know why I had a completely different interpretation of him. I thought he was like this. I mean, he still is kind of this philosopher type, but I thought, you know, he like because of his music that he was just always in his head, but he just, I don't know, like honestly, he kind of reminded me of me a little bit, I'd say, because he does some goofy ass shit. And
well, see, that's good because I feel like on the inside, I feel like George Harrison. Right. But on the outside, I think I present myself more as like Paul McCartney, where I'm more commanding and like, no, we're not doing that. That's, you know.
Well, see, I feel like I have that trait too, so don't don't feel bad about it.
So we're both Paul. We're both Paul on the outside. Inside you're John. Inside I'm George.
And that's why we work.
That's why we work. And then our friends could be Ringo collectively.
Sarah said that she felt like a George or a Ringo, and I honestly would, like, before watching this, would have thought that I would have been a Ringo, but I think I'm too vocally strange for that.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't honestly, like, looking at our core group, I don't see many Ringos, because I feel like we all have a drive. And I don't want to say Ringo doesn't have a drive, but like when he was of the Beatles, he definitely was the one who sat in the passenger seat.
Yeah.
And that's not to say he wasn't good, but that is to say, like, the interviews that have happened with the Beatles, he wasn't even the best drummer in the Beatles. Like, there were so many moments where Paul would literally be like, no, and then he would just take over and start playing the drums. And like, let's do this, and like he'll play the drums, and Ringo's just out having a smoke somewhere, and like you see him play the drums, and you're just like, oh, yeah, he's definitely taking over the song with this instrument. Like, Ringo never takes over the songs. That's one good thing about Ringo. He is a very good and competent drummer and can definitely keep the beat, but he is in the background. You can take over a song with the drums easily.
You can, yeah.
And he never does. But Paul, when Paul is playing, you can definitely see that he's making that the front of the song. Yeah. Like, he just takes over, and it's a completely different just spirit, I guess, when like behind an instrument. It's very weird to see that. And like, there's moments too where George will also play the drums, and you can see there's much more of there's a louder beat, there's a louder. They all have different approaches to the drums.
Yeah, of course. You mentioned that George, when he decided to leave, said replace him with Eric Clapton. I think it's really interesting how often George compares himself to Eric. It is.
It's so many guitarists. It's kind of sad that he compares himself to a lot of guitarists.
Yes, he does.
He mentioned George. I think he mentioned the Animals at one point. Led Zeppelin, he mentions them. I remember that. That might not have been George, honestly. But like, there's so many different artists that he brings up that he's just like. But Clapton was especially one, because was Clapton the one that he was talking about how when he plays the guitar he could play a story.
Yeah.
And he's like, and he's just like, I can't do that, and I'm just like, you fucking kid, what?
Yeah.
Like, whenever you play the guitar, I'm feeling a story. But like,
you do it, man. You do it. You just I don't know. I feel like he struggled. He just was less confident than John and Paul. I think that is it. But they didn't, when he would say things like that, John and Paul weren't there to be like, no, dude, you're really good.
Yeah.
You're fucking George Harrison.
They both kind of like, I feel like they let him down as friends in some of those moments, because that's where I was like, when he would say that, I would be expecting one of them to say something, and they just don't.
Yeah.
And I'm just shocked. I'm blown away. And there is a nice moment when George left. There's a moment where John left, and then he comes back in. And when he comes back in, he's like, Paul, you and I have to talk. And they go off into a separate room. And that separate room had a microphone hidden in the flower pot. And like, I don't know if this conversation was, able to be listened to before this documentary. This is the first I heard the conversation.
Right.
But in that conversation, like, John talks to Paul. He's like, we're both hurting George.
Yeah.
He's like, we're both failing him as friends and as bandmates, because he's like, you're being too demanding. I'm not being polite to his music, because like when George had presented the Something in the Way song, John was like, that's too waltzy. That's not. It was rock and roll. We're rock and roll.
Me.
Oh yes, I
me
mine. Yeah. He's like, that's too waltzy. He's like, we're rock and roll, man. We don't need a 3/4 waltz or 4/3 waltz, whatever.
Yeah, I really didn't like how he tore into him for that. But then when they were playing it again, he started dancing with Yoko, and then he was like, that's really good. He did turn around on it. It was like the first thing in the morning, though, that he came in pretty high energy, and they showed him the song, and he was like. And he just, the whole time George was presenting it, he was just ribbing him on it. And it's like, I mean, they've been friends for years, and we are just looking on the outside, but you can just see it in George's face. Like,
right.
And, he even at the end, he's like, well, if you don't want it, you don't want it, and walked off. Yeah. And it's a beautiful song.
It is beautiful. It's one of my favorites on that album, too. Like, I feel like that's the thing is, when I look at it, I love George Harrison's music. Like, he's like, in my opinion, he is my favorite. But but like I love what John and Paul have done, and I think I like more of their songs. But I feel like I just relate to George so much, especially after watching this documentary. I'm just like, yes, I love you. And as I don't know if I said it earlier, I meant to, but George went on to be in the Traveling Wilburys, which is like another one of my top 5 favorite bands. So George is in 2 of my top 5 favorite bands. But like, if you never heard of the Traveling Wilburys out there, Couch Potatoes, go listen to them. They are amazing. It's Tom Petty, Bob Dylan, George Harrison, Roy Orbison, and Jeff Lynne from the Electric Light Orchestra. Like, just a powerhouse band in and of itself, but one that didn't fight like the Beatles did. Like when they got together, they only did 2 albums, but when they got together, they were just like, we're all at the prime, except for Tom. Tom is kind of just becoming into his prime. Right. And it's like, we're all doing great, and they're all just having fun with their fucking songs, and they created 2 like amazing fucking albums, titled Traveling Wilburys Volume 1 and Traveling Wilburys Volume 3. This fucks. This fucking. And I might be wrong about it. It might be Volume 1 and 2, but I think I remember it being Volumes 1 and 3 just because we don't want to fuck with people. But like I just love George, and that was one thing that this documentary gave me, was much more of a love for George, especially what he had to go through being surrounded by just John and Paul, because John and Paul are just the goddamn masters of the craft.
Yeah, they just spit it out. It's like, it is like they're just improvising it until it's something. And it's like, what the fuck? And I'm like, obviously that's how it has to work. I mean, you can't just come up with a song overnight. But they do just come up with songs overnight. And they're like, and then we need to tweak this, and then we need to do this.
We got to tweak it. And then there's so many times where they hate each other's songs too, but they just go with it. Right. Where like, I can't remember specifics, but like Paul will have a song and he'll be like, well, you got to play it this way. And John's like, why? Your lyrics aren't that good. They're not smart. He's like, so why do we have to have this kind of a guitar going with these kind of lyrics? Like, you want a corny guitar going here and not something intelligent, because your lyrics aren't intelligent. And I'm just like, hearing that, I'm just like, Jesus Christ, like the comfortability to like talk to your friends like that, because it's like,
I mean, there is some merit to it, because like, obviously if you're being professional and you are the top tier band of the world, you got to be able to critique each other. Right. But obviously it has a way of turning into being snide and cruel to each other.
Well, that's the thing, is whenever he would say those things, Paul wouldn't take offense. Paul would be like, no, you're right. Yeah, it's definitely not a very high quality lyric right there. So yeah, why don't we try it this way? And then they would play it how John was saying. It's like, yeah, that does work. It's a level of just comfortability with each other's, like,
it's a trust too,
knowledge of writing, and also their feelings on it too. Yeah. Like, but that just didn't extend to George, because it felt like they were doing the same thing to George.
Well, he didn't get as many songs on any of the albums.
Yeah. Yeah, he only ever got like 2 or 3 or something like that per album. And there was a moment too that this almost made me cry. He mentions an album idea to John, and like, I've heard people after the fact say it could have saved the Beatles, and like, hearing him say it, I'm just like thinking the same thing, like, yeah, that could have saved the Beatles. And he mentions to John, he's like, why don't we just do albums per each one of us? Like, the next one, I'll put out an album of my songs. We could all do my own songs. I'll have the creative control over it. Next album, Paul gets to have his songs with creative control. Then it's you. And it's like, yeah, that probably could have worked for a few more years.
That could have worked, yeah. Because, I mean, basically that would be them doing solo albums. Yeah. But they'd still be playing with each other. And they enjoy playing with each other.
I mean, even when they did their own solo albums, like on Ringo's first solo album, I think both George and John played on it, not Paul. And then I think there's a George Harrison solo album, I think, that John played on, maybe, or maybe it was Ringo, one of them. But like, they would play, they still played with each other, and they still met up occasionally for dinners and stuff afterwards. Like, they were still friends. Right. It just became just such a huge thing that
they outgrew each other a little bit on the professional basis. So I know this is like really late for this, but let's take a soda pop break and then come back for closing statements.
Before we get into it, I do want to send you all down to patreon.com/greenandfaceless. If you like us rambling ADHD style like madmen and calling them critiques, then by all means, please go down to patreon.com/greenandfaceless. Check out our tiers. Let us know if you want merchandise. We're interested in broadcasting ourselves out there to the world further, and we could use your help to help us with that.
Yeah, please. And also, if you want to be a podcaster, there's a code that we have on our website that you can use that I forget.
Fabulous. I didn't know about that.
Yeah, and then we get a little bit of money from our hosting site. Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Podbean. Yeah.
I thought you were going to say, if you want to be a podcaster, stay off my lawn.
No, you guys can do what you want. You could pod about anything. I mean, that's kind of what we did. We just decided to sit down one day and we loosely talked about the structure of the show and just did it. We
still don't have an idea about it at all.
No, not at all.
I mean, that's one thing you can help us out with, Couch Potatoes, if you want to get in the comments and be like, this is how you should do it. And maybe we'll take your opinion on it.
Please, that'd be great. And you know what? I know there are things that I need to be doing for this show, but it comes down to that there's not enough time in the day. So
yeah, this is still a hobby for us. We both have full-time jobs outside of this, plus this. So
and we do put quite a few hours a week into this. So it's a very productive hobby.
Yeah, we appreciate you appreciating us. And if you want to appreciate us further, you can go down to patreon.com/greenfaces. And we'll appreciate you further. But back into... That's not true. We'll always appreciate you for everything. We'll do this show for free until we die.
Thank you for listening.
But to get back into Get Back, there's just a few more things I wanted to talk about. First, I forgot to say this earlier when we were talking about it, but watching them basically just improv these songs into life, really inspired the crap out of me.
Oh yeah,
because you and we're both writers. We both have different things that we're writing, but like I'm trying to write a novel right now, and I get maybe one day out of the week, I have a great day. Right. Where I'll write something and I feel really good about it, and I'm like, that's right, I can publish something someday. I might not be, Stephen King level of accomplishability, but like, I might, someday get there.
Someday, but you can do it.
But most of the days of the week, the other 6 out of the week, I typically will write and sit there and look at what I've written and be like, why am I doing this? Like, my goodness, this is just trash. Like, and I keep forgetting that it's a first draft. It's not that great. So watching this documentary and seeing these fucking masters of music struggle.
Yeah.
Oh, it was hugely inspirational for me, because it was like, none of them were like, I can't write this song, I can't figure it out, we're done with it, I'm gonna scrap it. No, they were just like, well, what works here? Like, let's just keep going at this. And they just kept throwing shit at the wall until finally they had a masterpiece. I'm just like...
Or they were so tired of playing that piece that they had to move on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That happened a couple times. It was pretty good.
Yeah. But it was such a good thing for me. It was like precisely what I needed to see these people who I've, like... I don't know if idolize is technically the right word, but I've definitely loved these people for a long time. And seeing the fact that they didn't just have perfection always was just very helpful for me. Very helpful for my mindset for what I was trying to write and for how I was writing. To where I was just like, oh, I don't always have to be fucking perfect. It's good.
Yeah.
It's fine.
You know what? I feel like I got some inspiration from this too, because I was also working a show where there was large stretches of time where I did not have to be doing anything. I was just standing by. So I got quite a bit of writing on the Adventures in Valgorn, another show that we do done. So look out for that. So if you want to be inspired, if I can I lead into a closing statement? Are we there?
I think we still had 2 more things to talk about. We had Yoko and the
That's right.
performance.
That's right. Well, let's talk about Yoko.
All right. Yeah, definitely.
I don't know. Maybe there's some kind of technique she has. But I think that was a pretty good impersonation.
It was pretty good. So that's the thing. Is Yoko widely known as the woman that broke the Beatles up? Everybody dumps it on her. Yeah, that's what this whole documentary showed me, was that it was nothing. She sat there politely in the back for all these sessions. Occasionally her and Paul would talk, occasionally her and George would talk, or Ringo sometimes. Yeah. She would have moments where she was laughing with them, but most of the time she just looked like she was just stoned in the background.
Yeah.
Just sitting there calmly, letting the music wash over her. There was maybe it was the tension that she was just there. I do hear that a lot, that her being in the sessions was bothersome to the other members. But if it was, you really don't see it.
No.
Not in this documentary.
No, they don't. They don't show it. They don't ostracize her or anything like that. In fact, she's like you said, she has conversations with them from time to time. It seemed like they were totally cool with being friends with her.
There's even this incredibly cute moment where Paul brings his daughter, or maybe it was his wife's daughter. I don't know.
It's Linda's kid. Yeah.
Yeah. What's her name? Heather, I think.
Yes.
She's in the studio, and there's just this super cute moment where she is imitating Yoko, where she's just singing into the mic and doing the scream singing kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know what to call it, so I'm sure that's offensive, and I'm very sorry.
Yeah, but imitating it probably wasn't very nice either. I apologize.
But it's such a cute moment because she's sitting there and she's doing that on the mic, and John's playing for her. She's next to John and he's playing, and you can see Yoko in the background. She's just kind of smiling and talking to somebody.
It was really cute.
It was such a good moment. Those were the moments that I just treasured in this whole thing.
Yeah.
But it definitely made me have a different opinion on Yoko, because I never hated Yoko. I'll be honest. As much as I love the Beatles, I do love. I'll be honest, I do love the Plastic Ono band. I've listened to quite a few of their songs, and I'm this is not bad.
Yeah, I like the stuff of hers that I've listened to. There's this one song that she produced with Portugal the Man, The Soul in the Box. I can't remember what exactly it's called, but it feels like it was a Pandora box kind of story. I listen to that all the time. She's
good.
got a very interesting voice. And I think this was, Portugal the Man was rather recently. So you can tell that her voice is older, but she got this very interesting tone in that song. So go check that out.
Definitely check out Portugal the Man also, just outside of that. They're a fucking amazing band. But I don't know, it's just, I've had such a, what's the word for it, stereotyped view of Yoko.
She has a reputation that I don't think is just.
Yeah, it's not. And it's I get the where it comes from, the whole relationship of John and Paul kind of being splintered, and John going that way with Yoko and Paul just being left out to dry. But it's just at the same time, it's Paul also had a fucking relationship. He had Linda. She was there occasionally at the studio. And I get that it's more of a creative thing with John, where he was, writing songs with Yoko rather than with Paul.
Right.
But at the same time, that's just how it be. You fall in love sometimes, and as Paul even said, he's just let them have their love. This is how it's going, and I want him to be happy. I don't know. She it's definitely not just. She definitely. At least in this documentary, again, I haven't seen the Let It Be
from the view of this documentary. She was not cast as the villain.
There you go. That's the way to look at it, and that's I appreciate that a lot. This documentary just opened up my eyes a fuck ton about everything about the Beatles, and I'm so happy it happened. The last thing, I guess, to talk about before our closing statements is the final act of the third part of this documentary series, the last 40 minutes of the whole
what it all leads up
here.
to, and it's twisted, turned up away.
Oh, it's so fun. And that is the final performance of the Beatles, which is famously done on a rooftop of their Apple Studios. I don't know if it's Apple Studios, but of their studio.
Yeah.
They just went up to their studio. They built a stage. They played up there for 40 minutes until the police kicked them out. And that was the final time this, like, one of the greatest bands of all time. The band that's, like, you know, wildly changed the industry.
Right.
Final time they played. Amazing. Like, I've loved that performance. I've never watched it fully. I didn't know if the full thing was recorded, honestly, before this. I just know that I've seen the, you know, Don't Let Me Down music video, which came from, like, there's like 3 songs from that performance that are on the album that are actually, like, they recorded it on that rooftop and were like, fuck it, that's the recording we're putting on the album.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And it was because they, initially they had this plan for this live, to do the album live and then cast it as on TV and do a TV show with the producing of it. But all that changed and the dates got pushed back until finally it was this free concert that they had no permits to do. It was so sock it to the man, and I fucking loved it. Like
even before that, though, it was so funny because before that they wanted it to be like this huge, uber big performance. Because like the new manager of them, I don't remember his name, but like he was just like, if this is gonna be the last time you guys are playing, it's got to be huge. You're the Beatles. It's got to be, you know, mind blowing. Like, I just remember there's like a scene where he's talking about like, we want to go to the shores of Libya and we want to have like 1 million flaming arrows shot out right at dusk. Like, and you guys are going to start playing at nighttime and torchlight. And like, they wanted it to be fucking huge. Yeah. And that wasn't, you know, the Beatles, like some of them, like I think Paul was like, okay, I guess, sure, yeah, like, we can do this. And
Paul, I feel like Paul started getting excited about it because like there is the amphitheater that they wanted, the Greek amphitheater in Libya excited him.
And Ringo's like, I don't want to leave England.
Yeah, George did not want to travel either. He's like, no.
Yeah, they're just like, our fans who started us are here.
Yeah.
Why would we go elsewhere and play for them when the people who started us won't be able to travel with us?
Yeah, and I think they came up with the perfect solution, and
which was the laziest solution.
Yeah, the laziest. Which is why it worked for them. They, like, you can tell in this documentary that while they still knew how to play together, they didn't know how to produce together anymore. There was something that was a little bit broken. So, you know, the fact that it was lazy meant that it was achievable. And I remember, dude, when they're 2 days out from this and they're talking about it, and the guy that's helping them set it up is like, okay, but you guys don't even like really know the songs yet. And they're like, no, dude, it's always like this. It's always like this.
I think there's even a moment where Paul's yelling at John, and this might be a little more than 2 days before. It might have been like a week before, but Paul's like, you have to know the lyrics. You don't even know the lyrics. And like John's just like, yes, but I always found that when my back's pressed up against the wall, I work better, Paul. it's just both of them like attacking each other like snidely because they knew the microphones were listening in and everything, and they both wanted to yell at each other, but they knew that if they did that would be like the big thing.
Yeah.
Because the band had already broken up at that point, so they were just making it funny. But at the same time, they were both very annoyed at each other. Yes. Like Paul's like, "You don't know the fucking lyrics to your own song." And John's like, "It'll be fine." And like even when they do the rooftop performance, the song titled "Dig a Pony" or "I Dig a Pony," like John still didn't know the fucking lyrics. I mean, they're basically nonsensical in my opinion. I love that song, but like they are just ludicrous lyrics. But like John had somebody come up and just hold the lyrics up in front of him.
Yeah, because nobody could actually see them. This is, unless you got up on your own rooftop, and there were a lot of people who did that. But
most of the audience is down on the sidewalks
to the street. Yeah.
And I love that too because there's just cameras down there, and there's like a guy running around. He's like, "Do you know who this is? Do you know who's playing?" And everybody's just like, I think it's the Beatles. And he's just like, yeah, it is.
You're right. I'm doing this thing with them.
And I love the, like, there's so many women or men who are just like, you know who that is? And it's like, well, I don't know, but that's definitely Paul McCartney singing. It's like,
yeah.
It just kind of blew my mind that they're just like, well, I don't know who would be playing, but that's definitely Paul McCartney. It's like, then it'd be the fucking Beatles. Like, to us, that just seems obvious. But back then, I guess there was so much, it's like, I don't know if they're still together, honestly. They're just all in their studios by themselves. They don't perform anymore. And, like, this is the first performance in years, too. So it was just such a fun performance. And it's done at the end of January. It was, like, 20 degrees outside.
Right.
Like, John and George are in, like, fucking fur coats.
Yeah.
And there's a moment where John's like
big fur coats too. Like,
it
must have been in fashion for a short bit because George wore a lot of that fur coat often. Really.
Yeah. There was this one funny, like, he almost wore, they weren't Uggs, but they kind of looked like Uggs boots.
Yeah, they were moccasins for sure. I don't know if they were supposed to be from the natives of America or India or what. I know that
I would probably assume India.
I would assume that's what I would like to assume, but they seemed rather warm, and I guess they do have mountainous regions.
Yeah, I have no idea, but, like, it was so funny to just see a lot of their fashion choices because...
Yeah, especially George's.
Yeah, George was not the most fashionable, man. Not that
I think he thought he did.
The fucking fur coat with the boots was so funny that he was wearing that, because I was just like, man, why do I care what I look like when I wear shit? Like, he's just going around in fur coats and moccasins. Like, fuck it.
The plasticky coat, the red, like, raincoat that fucking... But it also was cut... I don't know. I don't understand it. Ringo.
So that outdoor performance, though, it's phenomenal. The whole, I think it was like 43, 45 minutes of it is on this album, or on this biography, and it like, I had to watch it twice, honestly. Like, I watched it, and I was like, okay, I still got 40 minutes until I got over work. I'm just going to watch the concert again. Because it's just beautiful. It's such a beautiful moment. It's weird because they play only like 5 songs, but they play 3 of them like multiple times.
They play Get Back multiple times, at least 3
like
times.
I think they played Get Back 3 times, and then they did Don't Let Me Down twice, I believe. Like it basically came out that they played like 4 or 5 songs, and they did 10 total songs, but like only 4 or 5 individual songs. They just kept replaying them. Because they were doing it for the album, too, because they knew that they weren't going to get the full thing recorded in time. So they were trying to record some while doing that live performance. And it's funny because I think it's either Two of Us or I Dig a Pony. But I think it's Two of Us that's on the album. And at the beginning of that, if you listen to the album version, you can hear Ringo stop the production of it. Because it's just like they start playing, it's like ba-da-da-da-da, and then you just hear Ringo say, "Hold it, okay," and then they start over again. And it's because he was blowing his nose or doing something with one hand, so he had both of his drumsticks in the other hand, and they had started playing. He's like, "I'm not ready, guys." He's like, "I can't play yet." that made it to the album. When you listen to the album, you can just that just happens. You just start hearing it's like, ba-da-da-da, "Hold it, okay." So funny. It's such a just mishmashed album where it's like we have a short period of time, we gotta get this all out there. We're running out of time. Fuck it. Let's just do it on the roof.
So I really think what the benefit of watching this concert through this documentary, because I believe they have their documentary that they produced at this time with the concert in it.
But I don't believe they put out
the one performance of each song, probably. Yeah. So I think the benefit of watching it through this is the perspective that you get of these police officers.
Oh God, the poor guys.
It's so fucking funny. Like they get a bunch of complaints because, you know, not everybody is just like, oh yeah, the Beatles. Some people are like, we are trying to conduct business here. And they have to go,
this music?
What is this? This cannot be legal.
Yeah, and the Beatles didn't alert anybody. They didn't get any kind of permit. They didn't tell their neighbors, hey, we're going to be performing on the rooftop. Yeah. Like, I think there's even a moment where they say, we'll just play until the cops come.
Right. They hid a camera in their reception, and the police come in, and they're like, we need this to stop. We need this to stop. And they stall them for a really long time.
30 minutes.
They stall him for a really long time, and they bring different people to talk to them, and they're like, oh, you need to talk to this person. They're like, don't bring another...
With their stupid fucking chin straps.
Yes,
it looks
with their
so
helmets of that era, too. I think, actually, they might still wear those helmets. I'm not sure.
I think they do, and, like, I don't understand it, because it has a chin strap that goes under your bottom lip. But not under your chin, under your bottom lip. And it bothers me. It bothers me so much. Too. I felt so bad for the guy on film, because I'm just like, man, not only do you look like a dork, but now you're like, you're captured as the guy trying to force the Beatles to stop playing for their last time ever. While looking like a dork. They
get so frustrated, and I believe one of them at some time just softly to the other one says, it's rather good, isn't it? And they finally make it to the roof, and it's like, just let them finish this song. Just let them finish the song, or something like that. And they definitely play a different song. And I mean, like... And then this, like, I don't know if he's a sergeant or a captain or something, but this other higher-ranking officer finally comes. He's like, may I come in? He's very polite. And they're like, oh, shit. Then it's just like, let him go in. And he makes it to the roof, and that was pretty much right at the end of the concert. And it's funny, though, to me, that all three of them just kind of stand there and watch. Like, they get up there to stop it, and they just watch.
They just politely let it happen, and like, there's a moment where they get up there, and, you know, Paul sees it, and Paul kind of, like, looks over, and he sees the cops are there, and he kind of, like, looks at George, and he's like, uh-oh, look, the cops are here. You know, and George is like, uh-oh. You know, he's having a fun time, he's smiling about it. And then, I can't remember who it is on the Beatles management crew, but, like, he runs over...
Mal Evans. He plays the hammer in Maxwell's Silver Hammer.
Right. It's funny, though, because, like, he like, runs over and he unplugs George's amp when they finish their song. And, like, Paul and John had just started up another song. And George is, like, looking, and he's, like, looking, and he's like, fuck you for unplugging my amp. And he just plugs it back in and starts playing with it.
Yeah.
So funny. He's just like, you don't do this. I'm the Beatles.
Yeah.
You don't unplug us.
It's pretty good.
It all ends with John saying, I hope you all enjoyed the audition. I hope we get the part.
Yeah.
Jokingly walks off. Oh, I love it. I love it so much. I think, you ready for the closing statements?
Oh, yes. Let's do it.
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
No worries. You enjoyed it a lot, so...
Easily 4 stars. No doubt about it. This is, I don't want to say this because we're going to be putting up an episode, a special episode in just like 2 or 3 weeks about what our favorites are of the year. But you'll see this on the favorites list. This was one of my favorites. It's beautiful. It literally made me cry at times. I was laughing the whole time. Super addicted to it. Like, as I said, I watched the fucking concert itself over and over again. Over and over. I watched it twice. But watching this entire documentary over again, it doesn't sound like a task. It sounds like I can just do that again.
Yeah.
Because I fucking loved it so much.
It can be very passive, too. Like, you can do other things while it's on. Especially after you've gotten the story.
It's so funny to me that the Let It Be documentary itself picked apart like the worst bits of this entire moment to make it the very contestive, like combative, fighting album. You know, they're always mad at each other. They picked the worst moments, and it's hilarious because Peter stepped back, looked at the whole thing, and produced a very long project about how that wasn't so much the case. And then now I'm seeing a shit ton of tiny videos popping up all over YouTube where it's like, 2-minute clips from Get Back where it's just like all the bad stuff where it's like the moment George Harrison left the band or the moment John Lennon and Paul fought. And it's so funny that people are now picking apart this Happy documentary to find all the bad bits now.
Right.
They're pushing that everywhere. But that's the thing is like you can watch many different small moments of this because it's just like as you said earlier, it's like being a voyeur. You're sitting there and you're watching them create, and it's just, for me, it was a very marvelous, inspirational, all around fucking awesome documentary. Like this is easily the best documentary I've ever seen. 4 stars. Peter Jackson did an incredible job. Like it literally, before watching this, if you had said that I would like something more of Peter Jackson's filmography than his Lord of the Rings trilogy, I'd have like, you're full of shit. There's no way anything of Peter Jackson. There's no way Peter Jackson can create anything that would best his Lord of the Rings trilogy. Bested. Get Back. The Beatles Get Back. I love it.
The Hobbit series.
No.
Yes. No. That does not compare. So for me, I'm going to go ahead straight off. Yeah, it deserves the face and a half. This is, wow, it was really good. And what a fucking project that had to be for Peter Jackson. I'm sure there was at least that much footage for the Lord of the Rings. Right. But man, you look at all this shit that just has absolutely no structure. And then you were able to pull this story out of it. I think that's great. It's fucking
especially
phenomenal.
When you had no creative control over it.
Right, exactly. Yeah, he did not produce this. It is he just took it and shaped it, and very, very good job. What do I want to say about it still? We've said a lot. Well, it's a fucking commitment, guys. I said it before. It really is super long. I know you said you could watch it over and over again. I definitely could put it on in the background, I think, too, because, they're playing the tunes and being goofy, and it's fun. It's a lot of fun. But if you're not super into the Beatles, or even this genre of music, or British accents bother you, then you're not going to want to do it. But, we like British accents here on the couch. So
we do indeed. Especially the Beatles' British accents.
Yeah, Liverpool accents. I like that accent.
I really do.
At first, though, I was having a struggle with understanding.
Yeah, when I was a kid, I could not in any way tell you which was John and which one was Paul.
Right.
As a kid, I thought it was just one singer.
Oh.
It wasn't until I was probably like 8 or 9 or maybe even 10 where I was just like, oh, Paul and John both sang? Oh, and so did George? Like, what? Like,
and sometimes Ringo?
And sometimes Richard Starsky? That was one thing, is I knew Ringo Starr was not his real name.
I knew his first name wasn't Ringo.
Yeah, but I was thrown. I was literally thrown. Because somewhere along the line, I have known that his real name was Richard Starsky, but that's not knowledge I kept. And so when John kept calling him Rich, or like when John would call him Richie, and I'm just like, why do they keep calling him this? And then it just dawned on me. I was like, oh, that's probably his real name, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I looked it up, and I'm like, yeah, his real name is Richard Starsky. Okay, got it.
I do believe it's Starkey.
Starkey, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, see? It's not knowledge I kept. Yeah. That was a very odd just factoid that I noticed was, when they would put up, because whenever they would play a song, Peter would always put up a little title card that's just like, this is what they're playing, and it was written by, Lennon McCartney or George Harrison. And for whatever reason, Ringo, whenever he had a song, it was credited to his non-stage name, to Richard Starkey.
I wonder why that is.
Like, I wonder why he did that. That's a very, it's nothing like it, whether he had credited to Richard or to Ringo. Like either way, it was his song. But it was very interesting, just factoid that I noticed.
I wonder if some studio or something somewhere owns the name Ringo Starr.
Oh man, that would piss me off.
Yeah,
took that from
like the first studio Because if I'm not mistaken, I could be completely wrong about this, but I always thought that it was some industry person that introduced them to Ringo. It's like, hey, this is this drummer that we know could work for you guys.
Yeah, I can't remember. I know it. I think it's said at the beginning, like at the very beginning, because like Peter has a very brief
overview
lead up to the album. Yeah, overview. Yeah. Thank you. It's very brief. Like it's maybe a minute of just title cards.
Yeah, it was. I think a little longer than that. At least it felt a little longer than that.
Yeah. And it was just like, Paul and John met each other, such and such introduced them to George. And I think it said George introduced them to this great Liverpool drummer named Ringo. Because, like, their first drummer, who was his name? Pete Best? Was that
I don't remember.
That might be completely wrong, but, like, I think that was their first drummer. But then they got introduced to, great Liverpool drummer Ringo Starr. And, like, at the time, he was, really well known in Liverpool for his drumming. And then, bada bam, like, he joined the best band ever in, history.
Bada bam. And that's, I think, our Bada Bam show. How do you Bada Bam feel about that?
Definitely go check it out. It's on Disney+.
It's on Disney+. Every single time I finished the episode, I felt like it was on a different... I thought it was on Hulu.
Right.
Every time I thought it was
because you're listening to a lot of swear words. They were cussing a lot. It's just,
Disney...
The only area you can get swear words on Disney, kids. If you want to hear swear words, check out Disney's The Beatles.
Get back, kids. That's for you.
Well, thanks for listening, everybody. I really appreciated it. I am the Green Traveler from Gorsh.
And I am the Sleepy Leone with no face.
And I'm Paul.
And I'm Ringo. Safe travels and good night. Green and Faceless on the Couch is a proud production of Fiction Works 19. If you like the show, please show your support by rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts. Like, follow, subscribe, wherever you might listen. We also now have a Patreon account. If you feel so inclined to support us in a financial manner, please become a patron by visiting patreon.com/greenandfaceless. You can also find more information about us on our Facebook account or on the Fiction Works 19 Instagram account. Thank you so much for listening.